Forgive to live. In Ernest Hemingway's short story, The Capital of the World, a father searches for his son Paco. Now, Paco, of course, is a very common Spanish name, and Paco, his son, ran away from home after a shattering disagreement that broke the father's heart. After searching all over Spain for his son, the desperate father placed a personal ad in a Madrid newspaper that read, "Dear Paco, all is forgiven. Just meet me in front of the newspaper office at noon tomorrow. I love you, your dad." The very next day, 800 Pacos showed up seeking forgiveness. One of the best gifts you can give to yourself is the ability to forgive. Forgiveness has increasingly been studied in scientific circles in more recent years, and the evidence is growing that forgiveness is a powerful healing agent for body, mind, and spirit. Forgiveness is said to lift a psychic burden and offers a profound sense of relief and inner peace. Forgiveness can be a powerful de-stressor and thus facilitate health and healing and enable weight management with greater success. So give me some time now to make my case in favor of to forgive is to live. Now, we have known now for some time that heart disease is a disease for many Americans, where all too often the very first sign of heart disease is sudden death. There's nothing you can do after that. They never had any symptoms until the heart attack hit. It's really a disease then that creeps up on us in an insidious manner. The tragedy is that with our rich diet, we can build our case of progressive atherosclerosis by the forkful. But since the disease does not clinically show up for decades, we often don't make the connection between the diet and the disease, and so we are stunned when the heart attack hits. Actually, this narrowing and hardening of the arteries is like an arterial rust that settles on the inside of the coronary arteries. This atherosclerotic rust then may reduce the optimal blood flow to the heart muscle, which then may often find clinical expression in chest pain called angina pectoris, or it may actually even block the coronary artery, which is becoming associated with a life-threatening heart attack. This hardening of the arteries is a systemic process and may affect most of our large arteries in the body, leading to the circulation-related diseases and conditions. This may include reduced mental comprehension, senility, and Alzheimer's, and strokes, lower visual and hearing acuity, kidney disease, erectile dysfunction or impotence, intermittent claudication, degenerative disc disease, gangrene affecting our feet in diabetics, and heart disease. Hardening of the arteries, an underlying disease process that has a powerful effect on our well-being and on our longevity. But there is another contributing factor to health and disease, and that is the hardening of our attitudes and our emotions. Well, let me take you back 200 years ago when the scientific foundation was laid how emotions may actually affect health. It centers on two individuals, Alexis St. Martin, a 20-year-old Canadian fur trader, and William Beaumont, a physician who became enabled by Alexis St. Martin to become known as the father of gastric physiology. And here is the fascinating story of how a non-healing gun wound to the stomach of this young man revolutionized medicine. It provided an unusual experiment for this physician that shows how different foods and emotions can actually influence and affect our physical well-being. Here's what happened. The edge of the wound in Alexis' stomach had attached to the edge of the hole in his skin, and thus it formed a fistula, sort of a passageway, which allowed the physician to look into the inside of the stomach. It provided an easy access to observe whatever was going on inside of this young man's stomach. Realizing the untold research opportunities that the passageway to the inside of the stomach presented, the doctor hired Alexis as a laborer to work for him in exchange for letting him observe the digestion of different foodstuffs in his stomach. Interesting, isn't it? In the process, he made many discoveries which he published and which made him a preeminent expert in human digestion. Eventually, Dr. William Beaumont became known as the father of gastric physiology. Now, among his discoveries was the effect of emotions on the inner lining of the stomach. It was by sheer accident the doctor observed one day that the stomach lining was deep red instead of the usual pink color, and it was deeply engorged. At the same time, he noticed that Alexis, the patient, was quite upset. Could his patient's emotional state have anything to do with his stomach changes? Here is what Dr. Beaumont in successive observations found and reported. Every time Alexis was calm and relaxed, his stomach would look pink and appear calm and relaxed. And whenever Alexis became angry and turned red, his stomach would also turn red, becoming engorged and secreting large amounts of gastric acid. Now, since those early observations, we now know that some people may respond to harbored and long-held emotions with asthma, migraine, ulcers, angina, and heart attacks, and even cancer. Emotions then can break down the life force and invite disease and death. Or they can promote health and vitality. Much of the outcome then may depend on the kind of emotions that we experience and harbor. Our health and happiness then can be influenced on how we react to life's challenges and how we solve daily problems. And it's this whole process of solving problems that adds meaning to our lives. Through the often painful struggle of solving problems, we actually grow mentally, we grow emotionally, and we grow spiritually and develop deeper insights into life and into ourselves. On the other hand, we can also try to avoid problem solving or to blame others for our problems. Instead of dealing with problems, getting through them, we try to get out of them. We try to rationalize them away. We ignore them, we deny them, and even we drown them. But that actually diminishes us. We lose out on the richness of life. We miss out on personal growth, on inner healing. We miss out on shared victories and in developing greater self-understanding. Somehow, we may overlook that stress forces growth, and growth leads to insight and understanding. So let me share with you a little story. It goes back. Once upon a time, there was a man who found a monarch butterfly cocoon. With great anticipation, he took it home to observe. And when the day came for the butterfly to emerge, it struggled for hours to escape through a tiny opening in the cocoon. At one point, it seemed to get stuck. So the man took scissors to the cocoon to help the butterfly escape, which he did with great ease. But for some reason, the butterfly had a swollen body and small shriveled up wings that even hours later never opened in a display of glory. It seemed doomed to drag its deformity about and never fly. Why? Well, the constricting cocoon And the struggle necessary to pass through the tiny opening was nature's natural way of forcing fluid from the body into the wings. Sometimes, you see, life struggles are exactly what we need to spread our wings. Without the challenges and hardships of life, we would possibly remain spineless worms, like the caterpillar in a cocoon. So it's the flexing of our muscles against the walls of difficulty that make us stronger and more self-reliant. Now here's another point. I believe that what happens to us is not as important as we perceive and relate to it. Let me tell you a story. The story is told of a high society woman. She frequented regularly one of those high, fancy New York hotels, the Astoria. For years, she had reserved the penthouse suite as a private haven where she could renew and recharge her batteries in total anonymity. Now, after a couple of unfortunate incidents, the hotel management soon learned that this fancy lady expected absolute, uninterrupted quiet. She wanted to have total anonymity. Well, another visit interruption happened again. And in a fury, she phoned the front desk. "Listen, I paid for rest and relaxation, not for this ear-shattering noise next door." Oh, she was upset. Now, it was late at night, and the general manager had already gone home. In a dither, the desk clerk called him at home. "Help! Mrs. So-and-so is here, and we have made a terrible mistake again." The general manager left his home and rushed to the hotel and discovered that the guest who was registered next door to Mrs. So-and-so had had a 9-foot concert grand piano delivered that morning. I mean, you get the picture? So did the manager. He rushed up to the penthouse suite of Mrs. So-and-so and was greeted by an outburst of verbal abuse. She was obviously very upset, and for good reason. The general manager fell all over himself with apologies. "Oh, we are very, very, very sorry. We have made a terrible mistake. We have made a terrible blunder, and we will, of course, refund everything to you. In addition, we will give you an extra week pro bono." Oh, I'm personally mortified about putting Mr. Arthur Rubinstein next door to you. Whom did you say? Arthur Rubinstein. You know the... yes, my. Oh, no. Needless to say, the next morning, that fancy high society lady ended up sitting at the master's feet for hours, listening to his disruptive noise. Yeah. Same piano, same man, same rooms, same woman, but different attitude. We understand now better that what happens to us is not as important as we perceive and relate to it. Experiencing life and coping with life will make us either bitter or better. The difference is just one letter, the letter I. If we are mostly concerned about our rights, about our entitlements, then the doors are wide open for disappointment, for hurt, for resentment, for holding grudges, bitterness, anger, hatred, fear, and guilt. These are self-destructive emotions that are foremost in depleting our emotional energies. And these are the very blockages which stunt the life-giving streams of human interaction and cause our spirit to shrivel and harden. You may call it a spiritual atherosclerosis, a hardening of the spiritual arteries, a hardening of the attitudes. Now, let me give you an example of how these emotions can destroy us. A patient came to see me ostensibly about her depression and her binge eating. She was a nurse. She was a slender person most of her time, but she had piled on an extra 125 pounds over the last 10 years. However, only within 10 minutes into our diet-related interview, she exploded. "He did this to me, And this tramp caused it all. She did this to me. She ruined my life. She too is a nurse. She had this affair with my husband. When I asked her, when did she have that affair with your husband? 13 years ago. Now you see, her hurt, her resentment and pain were so deep that she had become totally obsessed with that other woman. She had her tracked. She even knew her weight. She resented her for what she had done to her more than a decade ago. She hated her. She resented her. Bitterness and anger and hatred, the instinctive means of revenge, all this created an emotional focus toward that person. It dominated her thoughts, her emotions. It dominated her decisions, all contributing to her severe depression and for her huge vulnerability to binge eating and its obvious consequences. And did this help her to restore her marital relationship? No. If anything, it distracted her from developing herself. It was a classic poor me story, feeling sorry for herself and pacifying herself with binge eating. Instead of processing the pain, finding a new level of balance and harmony in her life, she slipped deeper and deeper into her depression. She felt lower and lower into her self-esteem, and her weight kept climbing and climbing and climbing. But the tipping point came. After several sessions, when it finally hit her, that woman, the moment I started to hate that woman, I now begin to understand I became her slave. I could no longer enjoy my work because she controlled my thoughts. I became fatigued. The work I once enjoyed became drudgery. Even vacations ceased to be joy. And then she summarized her insight exceptionally well when she said to me, I now understand. That woman, she had a tyrannical grasp on my mind. Instead of developing myself, processing my pain, and focusing on my life, I became her slave. What a tragic waste. What she needed to do was to turn her anger, her bitterness, and resentment into forgiveness. Forgiveness, to clear the record and to find freedom and release from the burdens that she carried. Research now has clearly shown the physical and emotional benefits of forgiveness. People who learn how to forgive feel less angry, less depressed, less anxious and stressed, and they become happier and self-confident people. At the same time, grudge holders who relived in their minds a hurtful experience and managed forgiving, these people had significantly lower blood pressure, were more capable of losing unwanted pounds, and experienced lower heart rates. It was forgiveness that helped them to remove emotional obstacles to health and to healing. However, as you may know, forgiveness is not easy. It has to do with temperament, with our family history, with a person's age and gender, and a person's spiritual understanding and personality. Until we see that the offense may have actually been a benefit and blessing in disguise, namely forcing personal growth, insight, and self-understanding, and sensitivity, and above all, a new sense of freedom, we remain in our prisons of destructive emotions. Well, let me close with a special story, one of my favorite stories, the story of Mrs. Hannah. Oh, she resented the verdict when the judge announced the sentence, lifetime in prison. Why should he live when her daughter, her only child, had to be dead? She threw darts at his picture she had on her basement wall. She hated him, pure hatred. And yet she was totally unaware that she herself was becoming imprisoned in her own prison of hate. And then one day, the Gideon man came, the man from the Gideon Bible Society that's involved in prison ministry, and he asked her if she would address a Bible that would be delivered and presented to the imprisoned killer of her daughter. Oh, she was outraged. How dare you come to me with this request? No, I cannot do it. No, I cannot do this. No, it's impossible. I cannot forgive him. And then the Gideon, with a softer and almost apologetic voice, and with great sincerity, asked Mrs. Hannah, but how can God forgive us unless we can forgive others? He left her presence, he left the house, and left behind a very tense situation. Now, over the following weeks, Mrs. Hannah's conviction grew that the minister had been right at the gravesite service when he said it was meant for evil, but good may come from it. When she prayed for forgiveness for her own feelings of hate, she finally found release. And then she made that courageous phone call. She called the Gideon. Hello, this is Mrs. Hannah, the one who was outraged when you visited her last time. Would you please come and bring me that special Bible? I think I'm ready to sign it now. It didn't take long, and the Gideon showed up at her house, and he presented the Bible for her to sign. And she, with a trembling hand, before signing her name, wrote, Mrs. Hannah loves you. When the murderer received that Bible and saw the handwriting and the note, Mrs. Hannah loves you, he broke down. Never had he been told that someone loved him. Never, ever. It made such an impression on him that he eventually became a born-again Christian. He took the chaplaincy course in prison, became a chaplain to his fellow convicts, and recognized that love had changed his life, and now love he could share with others. But the love note in that Bible also changed Mrs. Hannah. The old, embittered Mrs. Hannah had died, and the new Mrs. Hannah had emerged. Why? Because she discovered peace and freedom through forgiveness and acceptance. That to forgive is to truly live. I'm Dr. Hans Diehl, and my blessings to all of you.